Today I'm going to be showing you how to take an Ubuntu virtual private server on DigitalOcean running Flask using Apache 2 as the web server through a custom domain. This was a request from one of the users subscribed to the channel, and so I appreciate the request, and I'm going to try to cover that today. So the first thing we want to start with is your domain. So my domain name that I'm going to be using for this is zuvis.com. It's just a domain I have lying around. I have a bunch. And basically the domain was registered through GoDaddy. What you have to do is you have to tell your domain registrar, in this case mine's GoDaddy, where your authoritative DNS name servers are, and those name servers are going to be DigitalOcean's name servers. So you can sort of Google any hosting provider you have and say, like, what are the authoritative name servers for them? But I've already done that, so I just wanted to show you real quick. In GoDaddy's domain manager, under the domain settings DNS management, you have your name servers. You need to make sure this is set as so, NS1, NS2, and NS3 at DigitalOcean.com. For those name servers. If not, go ahead and update it. It can take anywhere from a half an hour up to days for the time to live to update and the rest of the internet to propagate those changes. So you'll want to do that first. Okay, once that DNS is updated, now what you've done is you've given control to DigitalOcean to manage your DNS. So we'll have to separately set up our zone file, our DNS information on DigitalOcean, and I'll show you how to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new droplet. If you've watched any of my other videos, you saw this before. Once we're in here, the image we should choose actually is the LAMP stack right here. That's the Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. You don't have to do that, but I like this stack because it comes with a lot of the underlying dependencies, in particular Apache, that we're going to need for this project. So we'll go with that. I'm just going to do the $5 VPS here, or droplet. And I'm going to go to San Francisco just because I'm in Arizona. And I'm actually going to use a password. Don't recommend this for production, but it's just easier, so I don't have to do anything right now. Set up a password here for root so that we can log into it. I'll keep the name the same. The name doesn't matter. Yeah, and that looks good. So I'm going to, did I forget anything? I just want to double check. No, looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and create the droplet, and that will take a couple of seconds. You'll notice over here on the other side, I've got how to deploy a Flask app on an Ubuntu VPS. So that's the documentation I mentioned that will follow. And again, it's a little outdated, so I'll be covering what things have changed since this was put out in 2013. So it's been quite a while. No wonder why this is outdated. All right, just waiting here for the droplet to finish creating. Looks like once that's done, we're going to SSH into it and start installing dependencies. And the first thing I'm going to show you is that, you know, anytime you launch a VM anywhere, you need to do an update on all the packages installed. So with Ubuntu, we use the package manager for that. My VPS is up, so here I go. SSH root at this IP. Oh, refuse. That means it's not up yet, so give it a second. And there it goes. All right. Uh-oh. Shouldn't be trying to use a public key for that. Might still be. So, there we go. Now it's asking me for password. So it was just coming up a little too early. So here we go. Log in with my password. Ta-da. Okay. Once you're inside, the first thing you want to do, you're root, so you don't have to do sudo. Sudo is if you're not root. So apt-get install, apt-get update is the first thing we want to do. So update all of our repos. Yeah, so we'll give that a second. Okay, it's done. The next thing we're going to do is very similar. We're going to do an apt-get upgrade. This will upgrade all of the packages. So after you update your repos, where those packages are coming from, you update your packages. That way you don't have any security problems, but also just from a package compatibility perspective, this is a very important step, so don't skip it. Otherwise you might run into some serious issues. All right, that's finally done. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to copy and paste this very first line in this tutorial over here. apt-get install libapache mod wsgi and Python development. So mod WSGI is how we can run Flask. It also supports a number of other WSGI compatible sort of web frameworks, but for us we're going to be running Flask, and you will need WSGI, and we'll have to configure that so that we can support Flask through Apache. So while that installs, I'm going to go ahead and prep the next command, which is to enable the mod. But first we have to wait for this install to finish. There we go, it's done. So now I'm going to enable WSGI. It says already enabled. Cool. Now we're going to cd into where our web files are, var www. We are going to make the directory Flask app. Then we are going to cd into that directory, and we are going to make another Flask app directory, and finally cd into that again. And then we're going to do a make dir static and templates. So we're making some of the skeletons. And now we will see that we have that structure that's being shown here. And now it wants us to create a dunder, which is the double underscore. Sorry, so dunder, shouldn't have doubled that. Init.py. And that's like the main Flask file. So I am going to actually use VI instead of Nano as my editor. So we'll open that up, and then we're just gonna copy and paste this. It's not really necessary because the WSGI will override this, but if you were running it from command line, which it's helpful to list the interpreter like I just did. Actually, just to show that, because I did that quick, so that's all I did. So I just copy and pasted that, but I added the interpreter to the top. Again, it's not really necessary for Apache to run it, but it's necessary if you run from the command line. So next thing, we have to install pip. And I believe that fails, yeah. And that fails because we actually don't want to install the sort of V2 of Python pip. We want the V3. So if you notice, I just put Python 3 pip. Go ahead and install that. Because we're going to do this whole thing using Python 3. There's absolutely zero reason to use Python 2. Okay, and we're going to install the virtual environment. Sorry, to do that we have to change this to pip3 because that's what we have installed. So there we go, pip3 install virtual environment. That worked. Now we're going to create a virtual environment inside of this Flask app. So now when I ls, we'll see the VM directory there. And then we want to source that virtual environment. Again, this is for dependency management, so it's very important we source that so that our packages are installed under that virtual environment. Now we're going to, again, pip3, got to modify all these commands, pip3 install Flask. All right, Flask is installed, and now we should be able to run it like so. There you go. So Flask is running. It's just listening on localhost, so that's not helpful for our VPS. So, but just to prove that Flask was working, we wanted to run that. Now we're going to deactivate the virtual environment. It's not needed anymore because we're not running this locally. We're going to end up running this through Apache, and so we'll need WSGI to honor the virtual environment so it can find the Flask package. So vi this file, which, we need .conf, because if you read the docs here, it says newer versions of Ubuntu. We're on a very new version. We're on like 18, because again, this is a 7-year-old article. So flaskapp.conf. Once you got that, go into insert mode. Now you got to create your virtual host. This is how Apache knows what the website is that we're trying to service. So if you were doing HTTPS, you would need to change this to 443 and so on and so forth. But I'm just doing regular old HTTP. So my website, I'm going to change it to zubis.com for the name. That's very important because the star here says that it'll listen on port 80 for anything, and then it matches based on the server name that's provided, and that's how it knows what domain to serve. So if you had multiple domains, that would matter a lot more. I am going to list my server admin email here. And the rest of this looks very good. You'll notice that it has this line about WSGI script alias, so that tells it where your Flask app where your WSGI file is going to be. So that's important. Okay, once that's done, it wants us to enable the virtual server, so let's do that. All right, that says it worked. It does want us to reload, but we'll like pause that. We don't need to do that right now. So now it wants us to go up a directory and create the flaskapp.wsgi file. All right, so for this, we're going to paste this right here, the contents of what they want us to put in. There are some slight changes which are super important. Number one, we don't want to use the system Python. We want to make sure we're using the environment Python version 3. It's the first thing. And the second thing kind of goes hand in hand with that. For this syspath insert 0, we actually want a different path here. We want the one for our virtual environment, so that's going to be what is that going to be? Actually, I need to grab it. So let's go grab it. I'll show you how I do that. So we want to go into our Flask app. We want to go into the virtual environment. We want to go into the library. We want to go into Python 3.8 and then site packages. This is the path we want. So we type pwd to get that path that we're in. Take that. Now let's go all the way back out to one more up to our Flask WSGI. And we want to add this path here. I don't think we need that other line. And then set your key to something. So I'm going to do Zubis123. Oops, no apostrophe. There we go. Just for whatever. So that should be all we need there. And then we're going to restart Apache. Okay, now if you want to check the logs for errors, you can first check syslog for general errors, just telling us, hey, the Apache web server restarted. This message here is totally fine. It says that right over here in the docs. But anyway, no errors there. But then you also want to check specific errors with the sort of virtual host and stuff. And again, no errors here. But this is a good one to tail when you try to send a request to the web server, because we're at the point where we want to validate that when we go to this IP in a browser that it triggers. Yeah, so actually it doesn't trigger the website, and it's because it's not reading the header, the domain name in the header, because we're just going to the IP. So you get this, what do we call it, DigitalOcean page. So what we want to do now is set up DNS. So we're going to come over here to DigitalOcean and go to the networking tab. The domain we want is zubis.com. Again, remember, you have to first go to your registrar and change your authoritative name servers for this to work. And then what we want to do is just say at, like the main record, point it to our IP of our VPS server or Droplet, create record. Once that's done, you typically also want a www. So, but you know what? I like to do a CNAME for that, www CNAME, and the host name, just do zubis.com. Okay, so now we should have DNS that will work. Let's see what we get. So it hanging means the DNS is not resolving yet. So that's a good sign, actually, because we just updated this. So it will take a second. Now, yeah, there we go, failed. And I'll just let that kind of sit there. If you wanted to sort of like try to validate this another way, we could say dig zubis.com, and we can see that it's pointing to this 34 address. That actually seems valid, maybe? No, ours is 159, right? So we're waiting for it to resolve to a 159 address. It should not actually take too long. Guess we're waiting for a second. While that's going, we'll just keep an eye on our logs here. Nothing happening so far. Now, one of the things we could do is we could dig out a specific name server, and we could do ns1.digitalocean.com, and that should show us our 159 address, and it does, right? So if we were using that DNS server directly, we would have that update. But what we're waiting for is the rest of the internet to honor our DNS update. Now, we could cheat and we could manually modify our name servers to go to ns1.digitalocean.com, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to allow the powers of DNS propagation to bring me to the promised land. Now, it would have been better if I did this right from the beginning when we set up the DNS and had that once the droplet was created, because again, this step does take, there it goes. It's starting to update now. We had one update that showed the right IP. So a few more seconds. Let me try and refresh. Not quite there yet. Again, we know we've got it set up right because we look it up on the DigitalOcean name server and it works just fine. We cannot go in here to this IP address because that'll just show us the DigitalOcean page. So, and that's because it's not going by the virtual server. It's just saying, hey, IP. It doesn't match the server name, which is zubus.com, so it doesn't show us that. But once the DNS updates, the Apache web server will search the headers of the request and know that the server name matches, and it will show us the Flask app if we've done everything else right. So we could manually update our Etsy hosts file. I think this works on Mac. I know there was a while where they were like having some other thing manage the file, but so what we could do is we could put manually the address in and save it, and then if we refresh, yeah, now we get an internal server error, which is totally what we want. It means we messed something else up. So it's saying, hey, that can't find the module named Flask app. That actually might be, I'm trying to think. I think what happened here is when I removed that path, I think I actually did need the path of the app in there. So I'm going to put that back real quick. Okay, now service Apache 2, restart. I think that's the right, yeah, that's the right command. So go back to the logs here and refresh. There we go. Hello, I love DigitalOcean. So you learned a couple tricks there. Number one, in this Flask Wsgi app, we need both the path for the app and we need the path for the packages that it is using, if any. I think, though, that this needs to be an append because I think this is being invalidated. Like, let me take this away and do a restart here and then see if that still works. Yeah, no, that fails. So you do need both. Oh, because Flask is installed in the site packages. So now we know that both these lines were working. Oh shoot, I don't have the site package line. So we'll go grab it one more time. Let's go to Flask app, VM, lib, Python and site packages, pwd. This is what we want. This is where our packages are installed. And one more. And we'll restart. Too much. Alright, and good to go. Let's check if that DNS ever updated. Ha! The DNS finally updated. So now I'm going to come back into Etsy hosts. Oh, I'm on the wrong. That was on my VPS server. I want to edit the Etsy host on my local Mac that I'm on, so that DNS isn't being used anymore. So now I will watch the logs of the Apache server. Gosh, there's too much stuff in my history here. Var log Apache 2 error. Actually, just so we can see the access log too, we will tail everything in here. And so now when I hit this, boom, we see the request right there. And again, that is working via the actual updated DNS. Oh, see, this is my old, you see what happened? I went in, I closed the browser tab, I reopened the browser tab, I went in, I typed Zuvis. It's showing me Zuvis, which is actually from an app running in AWS because I had this domain pointed at AWS prior to this video. So now if I refresh, I'm still getting the wrong thing, but I bet if I do www, which will sort of like force it to not use any DNS record it's looked up before and has cached, I should get, nope, I still don't get the new one. It's so funny. So DNS is still updating, so it's just sort of random, all the DNS lookup stuff. So we still have to wait for it to fully propagate for this to work right. Wow, okay, we hit a number of pitfalls in this one. So I think it's really great to kind of walk through those in my videos and do the troubleshooting because I think those are really big learning opportunities. You get to learn how things work when you hit issues, and so I think that's really the crux of the benefit of these tutorials. So in this one, we hit a big problem with DNS, the domain name service, and that resolves our domains to our IP addresses. And sometimes it can take quite a while for DNS to update. For example, if you're updating your authoritative name servers through your registrar, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, that can take days. You're pretty much at the mercy of both the TTL of the zone and the TTL of the records, which is the time to live, and so you just gotta wait. So in this video, I bypassed that by modifying my Etsy host, which can be very helpful when you're waiting for DNS to update. So I hope all of that was helpful to you. If you liked this video, please subscribe, and I would love to hear from you guys in the comments below if you have other things you want me to cover. Thanks.